Well, good morning, Park City Church. It is a privilege to be connecting with you virtually this morning. We've said it numerous times over the last year, but church is really different these days, and today is no exception. On this occasion, it's because of crazy, cold, wintry weather, so hopefully you were at home and warm and safe and not in the building because we are not there. And again, just thankful for the opportunity and the ability to be able to connect with you virtually this morning, particularly as we wrap up a conversation which we began back at Christmas, a theme we're calling When Love Comes to Town. Beginning with that promise of Christmas in John's Gospel, that the Word became flesh and made his home among us. God made his home with us, moved into the neighborhood. Love came to town. Well, what does that look like? And so we've stepped into stories in John's Gospel. He calls them signs, pictures of what it looks like for God's glory to be on display, his goodness to find expression in the world through Jesus. And today we come to the climax in John chapter 11 of this section of his gospel, the last of these signs in this respect. And it's the story of Jesus raising Lazarus. We're going to pick it up in John chapter 11, verse 38. It's not the beginning of the story. It's a long one again, but kind of the moment of excitement, and then we're going to reflect a bit on the context. So John 11:38 begins like this. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And then John tells us Jesus looked up and he prayed, giving thanks. And after he prayed, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him, but others went to the religious leaders, the Pharisees, and told them what Jesus had done. So today's a significant day for a couple of reasons. One, you know, it's Valentine's Day, which is a big deal for many. And another is we are still only 1 week removed from a painfully fresh Super Bowl loss for all the Chiefs fans with us this morning. I feel like both of these spaces, Valentine's Day and football, are probably treacherous waters as a communicator, but we're going to try to dip our toe into each of them in an effort to help us step into what I hope you will see is the good, gracious news of the gospel in this story in John's gospel. We're going to begin, we're going to make 2 observations. We're going to begin with the Super Bowl, specifically Tom Brady, so please quit listening. Don't shut it off just yet. Give me just a moment. But I think hopefully Tom Brady will help us to see the good news in our passage this morning. So the 2 observations. The first I want to invite you to consider with me is that when love comes to town, as we see it revealed in this interaction, we find that Jesus, he wades into our brokenness. He just wades right out into the middle of all of our grief and sorrow and brokenness. It's a theme that begins in verse 38 where we started. Jesus, once more deeply moved. A refrain that has been repeated throughout this story in John 11. We didn't read them all. This is just one instance. But we're reminded over and over again that out of compassion, Jesus is pulled into the suffering of his friends. It's been noted, in fact, that this movement in the heart of Jesus is this ache in him on behalf of those whom he loves is a kind of anger. And really, it's an anger at the effects of death in the lives of his friends. All that is broken, ultimately sin in the world, as he sees it lived and experienced through the grief and loss of these dear friends, moves in him or causes in him an ache for things to be put right, ultimately put right. And so he's moved deeply. Which brings me to Tom Brady, right? So again, please don't turn it off. But I saw an article this week. The headline caught my attention as I've been reflecting on this story about Jesus and Lazarus. And this was the headline: Tom Brady cheats, parentheses, death, right? So Tom Brady cheats. Leave you to kind of sort all of that out, sports fans, and wherever you may fall on that particular question. But not just that Tom Brady cheats, death. And the article went on to kind of reflect on his driving sort of competitive streak, that it's rooted in this ache for longevity, a kind of cheating, ultimately death, nutrition, all these things he's doing to prolong his career. But again, you can dig into all that yourselves. But what struck me is, just from the headline alone, was the truth, as I've been reflecting with this story of Jesus and Lazarus, that all of us, I think, are playing the same game. All of us are playing Tom Brady's game of cheating. We're all cheaters. We're all trying to cheat death, whether it's capital D death or all the little d deaths in our lives. All of us are playing the same game, trying to outrun perhaps those dead ends in your life, where you just keep bumping into sort of the same broken end, where things aren't resolving or improving or getting better or finding healing or wholeness, all those spaces in your life that just seem to be recurring dead ends, trying to cheat and find our way in, through, or around them. Those spaces in our lives that are out of our control. Again, spaces where we were desperately to remedy or fix or repair, and yet, again, they just continue to get away from us. You might call them those sort of unraveling ends in our lives, where regardless of how hard we work and how much we try to hide or bury or repair or control, they just continue again to get away from us. Little deaths, we might call them. Loss, grief, all those letting goes, those failures, those regrets, all those spaces, perhaps maybe where you experience seemingly unrepairable, irreparable damages in your life, maybe to yourself and to others. All of us, right, trying to cheat, all of us playing, whether we care to admit it or not, playing Tom Brady's game. Those little deaths, those spaces in our lives that perhaps are uncomfortable reminders of maybe much bigger things to come. And here in this story of Jesus and Lazarus, when love comes to town, we find that it's into those places precisely that Jesus is drawn. It's into those places in your life and mine that he wades into, willingly compelled to step into all of the effects and brokenness of sin in your life and mine, that mess, that grief, that loss, those deaths. He was drawn there in Mary and Martha's lives. And he's drawn to those very same places in yours and mine. All of those places where we feel the effects of sin and its effects continue to leave their mark on us. Maybe those spaces where we feel alone or we try to hide, lost in our own grief and struggle. Know the hope of the gospel this morning. Know that Jesus is drawn precisely there. And so that's our first observation this morning, and what I hope will be the first bit of hope that you find in all of those unraveling places in your life, that Jesus enters them. But not just that he steps into those places in your life. I think we see another observation in this story, and it's that when love comes to town and enters our brokenness, he doesn't just enter it, but he heals our brokenness by making it his own. That Jesus heals our brokenness by making it his own. And again, we don't see it quite specifically in the bit that we read, but the bookends of this miracle of Jesus bringing Lazarus to life, as John gives it to us, is bookended by two really helpful observations or insights. And the first is a conversation he has with his disciples. They're like, Jesus, you can't go there, right? You can't go to that neighborhood, right? They're trying to kill you there. And Jesus says, no, I'm going anyway, linking the life that he's about to work with the potential for his own death. And then at the end of the story, we saw a hint of it. Some people saw what he did and they believed in him, but some ran off to the religious authorities and set in motion, and John's gospel quickly accelerated the plot. Right, the game was afoot at this point. They were seeking to kill Jesus. And so there's a bit of irony in what is happening here, right? That in this moment, Jesus giving life to Lazarus means stepping more firmly into death himself. It means that giving life, bringing Lazarus to life in this moment is moving him more concretely and more quickly towards the cross. That he doesn't in this moment just cheat death. He enters it and takes that brokenness on himself, and that somehow through the grace of God transforms it and works life. I said we talk about football. I'd like to leave you with an image of Valentine's Day, right? The day that we celebrate love. When love comes to town, right, we discover he enters into our brokenness, but not just that he enters it, that he heals it by making it his own. But I think our picture of love is often, we go to all sorts of places to kind of fill out our understanding of love. But I think maybe a really helpful place where I go naturally, because I have twin daughters who are 8, is Frozen. For all the sort of big questions of life, Anna and Elsa have been a tremendous help to me, and I hope they'll be a help to you this morning. But Frozen, the first movie, you'll recall, we think it's a love story about Anna and Hans, this love interest we meet at the beginning. They sing this beautiful song, "Love is an open door." Right? It's how we think of love, this beautiful sort of back and forth love, sort of opening the door of possibilities, right? Where we engage in a life with another, and we complement one another, and just really sort of complete each other, if you will. Finish each other's sandwiches, I think is the way they put it. But this is the picture of love. It's where we tend to go. This beautiful sort of reciprocity. Love is an open door. This wonderful space where we, again, just complement one another. But we discover as you sit with the movie, right, this isn't the real love story, right? The real love story is very different, a very different picture of love. A love that is not really about the open door at all, but a love that remains and is faithful even though the door is repeatedly closed. Right? You know what I'm talking about. It's the love of sisters, Elsa and Anna stepping into the pain and grief and experience of her sister, even though her sister repeatedly closes the door. And I think perhaps this is a more accurate description or picture of the kind of love that we witness as Jesus works life for Lazarus and Mary and Martha, as he works to sort of bring back together the unraveling threads of their loss and grief and the effects of sin, as he weaves them back together. He does so in a way that steps into that death and grief and brokenness and takes it on himself. A love that isn't just convenient and all about the open door, but a love that repeatedly shows up and enters into our brokenness despite all of the times that we repeatedly and stubbornly close the door. Love that waits, knocks, and waits again. This is the picture, I think, of love that we begin to see in this moment through this miracle. And that somehow Jesus tells us in this moment, in verse 40 that we read this morning, right? That somehow he says, if you believe, you'll see in this the glory of God. Another bit of irony here in this story. Glory is a theme that showed up at Christmas, that when the Word becomes flesh, you will see who God is, full of grace and truth, that the glory of God would be revealed, his goodness in the world would be revealed in what Jesus does. And that somehow, miraculously, as this story hints, that glory would be most fully on display when he lays down his life on the cross. That he wouldn't just cheat death, he would enter it and take our grief and loss and death on himself and transform it and change it even when we repeatedly close the door. This is the hope of the gospel, the Christian life, the good news of Jesus, is that if you find yourself sort of lost, adrift in all the unraveling ends of your life, to know that Jesus shows up precisely in those spaces. And despite our repeated efforts to close the door, in his love, he takes those things on himself and transforms them and works life. But as we see in this story as well, as we close this morning, it's not just the hope of the Christian life, it's also the call of the Christian life. A love that enters in and lays itself down and takes on the suffering of others. And it's hinted at actually in this story of Jesus and Lazarus and Martha. Way back at the beginning, we didn't read it, but Jesus and the disciples again, dude, Jesus, you can't go there. Jesus is like, no, I'm going there. They're like, you're going to die if you go there. I'm going there. And in response, one of his disciples, John tells us, Thomas, interestingly, says, well, let us also go, that we may die with him. Perhaps in this moment, speaking more than he knew, the call of the Christian life, that once we've experienced the goodness and the grace of love, of Jesus, of God, when a love that shows up in its grace in our lives, enters our brokenness and takes it on itself, that once we have tasted of that gracious goodness, our lives are transformed, moved from death to life. And out of that grace and gratitude, we take up our cross, Jesus will say elsewhere, and we follow him. Perhaps as Thomas said, let us go that we may also die with him, laying down our lives out of gracious gratitude and stepping into the pain and suffering of others. It's an interesting image, I think, to finish with this particular series as we step into a new series in our church. We're going to step into an Old Testament book of Haggai, a season of prayer and fasting in the church. We're going to ask you to join us in prayer and fasting, praying some things together for our church and for our community and for your life as well. We'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. But stepping into this idea that a season in which we bring all of our misplaced priorities and our shattered expectations, we bring them in prayer, acknowledging that we are broken in need of help and that it's God's faithfulness, as we'll see, always at work, as we see happening in our reading this morning, always at work on our behalf, working goodness in our brokenness, transforming death to life. As we step into that season, we want to invite you to join us this Wednesday at 6:30. We are kicking this season off with a service, a reset service here, just a chance to kind of refocus, to consider our ways as Haggai invites us, and situate our lives by admitting our need and recognizing that God is faithful and at work. And so we want to invite you to join us this Wednesday at 6:30 as we begin this season, as we step into perhaps what Thomas hints at in our reading this morning. But if I were going to summarize kind of all that we've tried to express, you probably haven't heard anything after Tom Brady, so it's okay. Maybe you came back with love is an open door. I don't know. But if I were going to summarize what all of this, I hope, speaks to you and me, it would be, right, the hope that Jesus, in entering our brokenness and healing it by taking it on himself, right, that what he does for us in that moment, the hope of the gospel, the good news of Jesus, is that death, big or small, right, is no longer the climax that it used to be. It wasn't for Lazarus, and it's not for you. It's not for me. And out of that, right, out of that truth, living and resting in that gospel hope of what Jesus has done for you and for me. As you bring all of the unraveling ends of your life into this moment and into this week, may you go resting in the one who is able to do far more abundantly than all that you could ask or think, according to the power at work within you. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. Go in peace, Park City Church, and happy Valentine's Day. Stay warm.